concerned for my children. One has just recently become an adult and is starting to explore the unbelievable expenses that it will take to become established independently of our home. And compared to even what we had to do just 25 years ago, the odds are not in her favor. I'm just going to look at some prices and the American dream. Let's think about the word there, dream. A dream is something that you do when you're asleep. But if your eyes are open, it's a heck of a lot harder to think that this is even a possibility anymore. So I'm going to just explore some of the prices that I paid just 25 years ago. Okay. I'm not an old man. I know I got a little bit of gray here, but it's just starting, right? 46. Let's explore the prices that I was paying not long ago and compare that to what my kid today would have to pay if she leaves my house. Okay. When I got married in 2000, okay, 24 years ago, for food, our original budget for my wife and I was $25 a week. $25 a week. Our rent at the time at a small apartment was $350. $350. My health care, okay, so health insurance in 2000 was, and I've had cheaper than this, $50 a month for the whole family. And the deductible on that was $100 a year. Can you imagine that? So I'm going to take my little calculator and let's just add this up. What this would be in a year's time. Pull my little calculator up and let's just say 25 a week times 52 weeks in a year. So there's $1,300 a year. All right. Rent, $350 times 12. That was $4,200. And health insurance would have been, let's see, so 50 times 12, that's 600, so $700 a year. I mean, look at these prices. And do you realize at the time I thought that's huge. Now, I mean, I was only making $1,400 a month for not long after we got married, driving a bus for a private school. $1,400. And at the time, I was so obstinate that I told my wife, no, we can't get food stamps because I didn't believe in it at the time. It was that stupid fundamentalist school we went to, Hyles Anderson College. Now, eventually that did change and we were on food stamps for a very long time. Now let's look at what we got today. Okay, we'll draw a little line here. So here it's 2024. For a family of five, and I'll try to break this down, but for a family of five, we spend $600 a month on food. So that'd be $7,200 a year just on food. Now, before Obamacare, I actually had less than this. In the year 2014, I was paying $30 a month and $100 deductible for my health insurance. Okay, 2014. But Obama cared about me so much for the London throne with his Nazi friends from Great Britain that health insurance now costs, well, let's see, my wife has to pay $400 a month plus $5,000 a year deductible, which you'll use every single year. So let's do 400. So let's do 400 a month times 12. So she's got to pay 4,800 plus $5,000 deductible. Then my insurance is another $290 a month. So 290 times 12, and that's just because I'm so healthy. That equals 3,480. Now let's add up just our health insurance now, because Obama cares about me so darn much. 4,800 plus 5,000 plus 3,480. $13,280 a year. Used to be $700, but Obama, he cares about me. $13,280 a year. Now, Obama also cares about me so much that even though my house is not ever flooded since the day it was built in 1950, decided to run an insurance scam just like this insurance scam. This is not the only insurance scam that Obama ran. Obama ran another insurance scam with flood insurance. So he had the satellites make all these maps of floodplains, and he invented this thing called the 500-year floodplain. Okay? Now, here's just a little diagram of my property. Okay? This is my yard, front yard, house, okay? Backyard. Right here, there's a 4-foot section right here, about a 4-foot by 4-foot section of my yard that is in that 500-year floodplain. And because of Barack Obama, I now have to pay $75 a month for the entirety of my mortgage for flood insurance on a piece of property that has not flooded since it was built in 1950. 74 years. The entire country is 250 years old, but I have to pay Obama's flood insurance on top of his Obamacare with an additional $75 a month, or $750 a year just for flood insurance. I'll put flood insurance. Now, my total with taxes, let's see, taxes, property taxes on my property is less than yours unless you live in West Virginia. We have some of the lowest property taxes in this area. West Virginia thinks ours is sky high because theirs is actually extremely low. My property taxes, $900 a year. Okay. So, and this should be over here. I'm adding all this. And then also, let's see. So 9, that's 1,500. So 6,000, 7,000 minus that. So we're talking about another 5,000 a year in loan payments. So add all that up. It's around 6,600 roughly a year. 6,600 a year, something like that. Give or take. Okay, without the calculator, something like that. Now, this doesn't include electricity. I mean, I remember electricity back in 2000 was roughly at our little trailer. It was kind of high because it was window units and stuff. It was around $100 a month, something like that. So $1,200 a year. I'd say now we probably pay an average $150 a month, probably. So electricity, there's another $150. I mean, so times 150 times 12, what's that? And I know it's a lot more in the summer, less in the winter and all that. 150 times 12, $1,800 a year for electricity. Now, you tell me, how is a child supposed to look at this? Now, this is what I'm paying now. But understand, I bought my house in 2008. When I look at Zillow, the same house I bought for $85,000 on Zillow today in 2024 supposedly is worth $166,000. And it's probably not right because I had to double my uh, insurance on the house. And the house across the street that's a little smaller than mine just sold for a little more than that. So it's probably, and it's a little smaller. So it's probably right. That's the crazy thing. So she wouldn't be paying this, she'd be paying double that. So let's say for her, this 6,600 is now low estimate, $12,000 a year. So let's say she wouldn't quite have a family yet, but she'll have to eventually. So her food, let's say it's just a fraction of this. Let's say it's about 2,000 a year just for one person. All right. So you got 2,000 just for one person. We'll add that to the $12,000. So there's 14,000. And if she has to pay for just herself for insurance, 14, it'd be around 7,000 a year, give or take. And I know people that pay way more than this for insurance, right? And I know these numbers are getting kind of gibbered, kind of getting thrown around here all over the place. So 12 and 7 is what? 19. And so let's say her food is 600. Let's see, probably 200 a month times 12. So her food is gonna have to be at least 2,400 a year. 2,400 plus $12,000 a year. So there's 14 plus 7. So 14 plus 7. So you're talking just to get started, not counting electricity. Your electricity is going to be about the same or a little less every year. Okay. My 18-year-old kid, if she's going to start in the world, has to make starting out at least $21,000 a year. Do you realize most of my life I didn't make that much? I'm only going to make a little bit more than that now. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? This is why every politician in the country should not be allowed to make these huge paychecks that they make now. These $120,000 for a congressman or a state congressman making $70,000, $80,000 a year, because in their minds, this is easy to come up with. Most of them were lawyers before they even became. So they're independently wealthy, most of them, before they even go into the state legislature or the Congress of the United States or something like that. They have no concept of how big of a number that is to most of us. But for me, I mean, good gosh, this is only if it, and you add that all together with a family of 5. Let's say she grows to a family of 5, okay, instead of just by herself. Again, we're talking almost $40,000 a year is what you need just to, and that don't even include the electricity. Because Obama loves you so much. He really cares about you, and that's a big chunk of that. These numbers are astounding. But, you go into Congress and you work for 2 years, you get a health care package for the rest of your life. Everything's covered, right? Even the state legislature in most states. You go in there for 2 years and they say you never get elected again. You're set for life and you're making a paycheck for the rest of your life of 4 times this in some cases, especially in like California and New York and stuff like that. But even like Ohio and West Virginia, it's more than that. So, way more. So they can easily, these numbers don't even make sense in their mind. Like, well, why can't you make $40,000 a year starting out as an 18-year-old? They don't understand that, right? Because their kid's going straight to law school, or whatever. Harvard or something for what's Harvard now? 100,000 a year or something, probably. It was 50,000 when I was a kid. How's a kid supposed to start out with enough money and have any kind of dream? Now, let's say you add a school bill to that, and now you're $100,000 in debt or whatever anymore for 4 years, $60,000, $80,000 in a lot of cases. And so you got another 500, that's another 10, $11,000 a year you got to pay on top of that. If you got a $400 or $500 payment, this doesn't include car payments. This doesn't include electricity. Do you realize in my lifetime, I've never been able to own a car that didn't have at least 150,000 miles on it when I bought it? That's in my lifetime. I don't even look at a car until it has at least 150,000 miles because I know I can't afford it. So I just go straight to the oldest thing I can. I mean, one year, I went down to the credit union and it was winter. I thought maybe I'm going to get a deal here because not very many people bid on used cars that have been repossessed, right? And the lady says the minimum bid for this expedition is $4,000. I said, can I bid less? She said, well, you can write it on there, but it probably won't get considered. So I wrote $2,000 on there. And nobody else bid, so I got the expedition for $2,000. Had 150,000 miles on it, but it lasted me 7 years. It took me about another $4,000 to get it up and going, but it lasted for 7 years. So I had basically a $6,000 car, right? I've never owned a new car. I just bought my kid a car that's 24 years old, 25 really, because they're built a year before the year on the car, right? So 24-year-old car with 140,000 miles on it, but it runs great. We got it fixed up. Imagine if she's trying to buy another car and a school payment of $500 a month plus trying to buy a car. Starting out, how do you do that? And go to work and pay for it at the same time. How do you even make that much while you're going to college at the same time? This right here is assuming that your school bill is completely paid for with scholarships, and we're having fun with the scholarships. Okay, I actually wrote 4 essays for her here recently because she knows I love to write. I've got 2 books I've written. I love to write, so I've actually written like 4 of her college essays to help her out, and she's applied to a whole bunch more on her own and wrote several of them herself and stuff too. But we're trying to get the scholarships because this is without even the this is with the scholarships paying for the entire school bill. How can any American have an American dream when you have to have this much money to start? And that's a low estimate. And I've never even, like most of my life, I've never made that much money myself. Only in the last 4 years have I made more than that money, and I'm 46. And last year is the most money I ever made in my life. Okay, and it's, I don't know, 35,000 maybe. How's an 18-year-old supposed to do this? How's an 18-year-old supposed to ever believe in America or have a dream? You say, oh, well, you didn't go to college. Yeah, well, I thought I could save the world and all this stuff, which wasn't true. Let people, convince me to go to an idiot school and all this stuff. There's reasons. And I'm not saying it's impossible for me to go back to school, blah, 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 or that's impossible that I can make more. I could go out and be a truck driver right now and be gone all the time. But that's no sort of life. Okay, that's, you survive. So I've just decided that to go the middle of the road to the easiest job I can find, right in the middle, work only what I have to do, or which is 60 hours a week in my case, and just and juggle between work and a little bit of enjoyable life. Okay, so between the two of us, Beck and I make enough to cover this. How's an 18-year-old supposed to do that? How are you supposed to go to college and make $21,000 a year minimum, probably counting electricity and gas bill and trash and gasoline? I mean, you're probably talking closer to 28,000. Isn't that reasonable? If you start adding this stuff up. That's assuming you're 18 years old and you're by yourself. Try doing that when you're a family. For me, just to barely squeak by, I have to have $40,000 a year. The most I've ever made is 38 by myself. Last year, the most year I've ever made. And so, two of us just barely get by now with the basics. And we drive the oldest piece of junk we can find that we have to constantly repair. We actually, it's a running joke in our house. If we can get 6 weeks without a car repair, it's almost like a miracle. And this isn't joking, okay? And I've actually had so many car repairs before that my wife said, you know, hon, when you add up all these receipts for the car repairs, it actually equals more than a car payment. I said, no, it doesn't. I started adding up. I said, dang, look at that. So so we got rid of the old car we had at the time and got a little newer of a car. It was still old and junky, but at least it worked, right? It wasn't that expensive. But we are constantly putting our cars in and out of the repair place. And it's now we got cars that work better than before, but it's still a lot less than making a new car payment, because now a new car, good heavens, how could anybody afford a new car? $28,000 for a new car, just a sedan. I mean, I know you got the ones that are 16, 17, 18. You know, my first car was a Geo Metro that my dad gave me that was a 3-cylinder 1.0 liter. Now, understand, I am 6'3" tall. Can you imagine driving a little stick shift? It had no air conditioning, okay? And it was already about 4 years old when my dad gave it to me. But that car probably would have never died. Do you realize I gave that car to somebody who was a friend of mine, and he was just getting married and he was desperate? I gave that car away some 3 or 4 years after my dad gave it to me. Basically, I gave it to him for like $200. I said, just give me $200. That's good enough. You can have it. It's just, give me, that way you can say you paid for it, save face a little bit. Gave him that little car right before. It was like right before September 11th. So it was like, I'd had it for 6 years. It was just like a month before September 11th, and the gas prices started to go up for the first time. You talk about bad timing. That car took me from Ohio to Florida, and I'm not kidding, it cost $18 in gas. Gas at the time was 89 cents a gallon in Indiana and Ohio. 89 cents. There were places in the South it was 75 cents on the way down to Florida. Now, we're going to go to Florida this year because we all saved up. We pitched in. We took all year, and all 5 of us putting money into this big vacation package. So we're going to go to Florida. But we've been paying for it all year to do this, to go to Universal, and we're going to get the skip the line tickets and everything. We've already paid for it. Okay, so we're going to have a great time. We're going to have a vacation. But it's not like when my dad took us on vacation. My dad had to save up for 2 weeks or something like that. It didn't even really register as a big expense, And he made more then than I do now. Back before Biden, when money actually meant something. It means nothing now. $7,000 a year right now for groceries. I remember when my grandmother took me to Big Bear grocery store in Portsmouth, Ohio, and she loaded up the grocery cart, and I remember seeing the bill was $60. And I was about 13, 14 years old. She goes, man, buying groceries just isn't any fun anymore. It's just unbelievably expensive. They were making $40,000 a year, more than I've ever made in my life. And the quality of life is going down in this country so fast. as your money becomes meaningless, worthless, useless. You cannot keep up. You cannot outwork inflation. My whole life, I've never had enough money to put anything towards retirement. I often say that my retirement plan is the Belpre Bridge. I'm just going to, when I get old, that I'm going to go and that they got to put me in a retirement home or something. I'll just jump off the bridge. there's, there's no way our generation, and if my generation's never going to retire, what about my kids? There's no hope. So I've made them, I forced them now. I've started IRAs and I force them to put money into it every month. Okay. They will have something, unlike me. And I've given them every possible advantage I can. I said, no, don't go to an expensive school. Stay here. Now, is she going to listen? I don't know. Stay here, save up money, because you don't want to end up like I did, where you change your majors, you come out of school, and sure, you don't owe any school debt because whatever. In my case, I could pay it as I went along, and my dad helped some and all this. But in your case, maybe with scholarships and all this stuff, maybe you won't owe anything. But just to survive, you're going to be broke when you get out. Period. Best case scenario, you break even. And probably you can't even live because it's impossible at this point. How do you step out of the house? I mean, working at McDonald's, you realize what is McDonald's? Let's say you're making, I know what's minimum wage, $10.50 an hour. So say, I think it's $10.50. My kid works at McDonald's. I think that's what she makes. Something real close to that. So we'll say $10.50 an hour times, let's say you work about as many hours as McDonald's would possibly let you work. So about 30 hours a week, 315. Now, 315 times 52 weeks in a year, 16,380. So if you work about as much as you can, 30 hours, we can still go to college. And I don't even, 16,380, you can't, they got to take taxes out of that. Now, I don't include your electricity or having a car. I mean, realistically, the real number is closer to 30,000 by the time, you got to pay for gasoline. The American dream is dead. There is no American dream. A dream is what people do when they are sleeping. And people who are asleep, like our politicians, because they go into Congress making 60, 80, 100,000. Congress of the United States, 175,000 a year. Work for 2 years, they never get elected again. They make most of that for the rest of their lives. No concept that this is an insurmountable amount of money for 95% of us. Our generation, the next generation's screwed. My generation got screwed pretty hard by the generation before me. I mean, you 60s generation, you're the biggest scumbags on earth. Lost Vietnam, came back and just took everything from the next generation. And I mean, the World War II generation kind of started it, because they thought, hey, we're going to give everything. We're going to make our kids more comfortable than us, but they didn't, because they didn't really teach them to work. They didn't teach them to do anything. They just did things for them, made them so lazy, didn't discipline them well. Let them get away with anything, didn't learn anything about their country or government, and let London and the Nazis steal everything that they had fought for in World War II. That's all the Hugh Squire story. You should listen to my other videos to understand that. So now we make a video every month. There's no excuse for not learning and understanding that story. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch our monthly full moon videos we do every month. Your country was stolen out from underneath you during World War II, and we're just about done. You can only inflate the currency so long. I mean, I suppose you could inflate it in a sense forever. I mean, it's been done in other countries, and eventually you have wheelbarrows of money that can't buy a loaf of bread. The good news, though, if you want to look at the bright side, is Biden will probably make every one of us a millionaire. Now, $1 million isn't going to buy a loaf of bread, but we'll all be millionaires, right? So I guess there's a bright side to everything. There's no hope. There is no American dream. If you're awake, you're not dreaming anymore. I mean, you see these numbers and you say, that's impossible. For most of us, this is we are now entering to a state where a large percentage of us are going to be not much better off than the third world. And look at what happens if you try to give your house away to your kids or something. Oh, they can go back 7 years if you end up in a nursing home and take your kid's house from you. You can be an 85-year-old widow lady that's paid on your house for 29 and a half years. Your husband dies, you have no more money except for, $600 a month Social Security. You can't make the last payment. They'll take your whole house from you and sell it and not give you any of the money. And they do this all the time. You realize in World War II, World War I, rather, when the income tax was originally created, the government did this to steal land and property from the veterans who were fighting. They send their boys off to war. A whole lot of them died, leaving hundreds of thousands of people at home, widows at home and children, passed an income tax and then took their property because they couldn't pay the taxes because they killed the man in a foreign war. That's how evil this country is. And it's been like this for a long, long time. I mean, if we're ever going to have a real country, you have to end property tax. You have to end income tax. These are two things that I don't think our founding fathers could have possibly tolerated. There were types of property taxes, but they were very unpopular, okay? Income tax was not even fathomable to our founding fathers. Not even something they could imagine. Sorry for the coffee. So, if we're ever going to be a free people again, you got to get rid of income tax. You got to get rid of property tax. You got to get rid of Obama's scam flood insurance tax. It's going to cost me $75 a year for 30 years, or $75 a month for 30 years, rather. On a house that's never flooded before in its 74-year history, because it's in a 500-year floodplain that's twice as old as our entire country. I mean, the Constitution was made in 1789. Okay. You could say we're a country since 1776. So what are we talking? 250 years. And yet I live in a 500-year floodplain. How do you figure that? Where are those stats coming from? And this is just another con, just like Obamacare. So they will take you people living in England watching this, or you're living in Brazil or Venezuela or whatever. Our country's calling you guys the bad people and communists and socialists and all these lies that our government says about your countries, right? Or Russia or whatever. If you ever see this video, look at the con that they're doing on us. Imagine if you had to pay for this. I mean, they get free health care. Good gosh, they actually say to their some of you are going to call me a communist here because I know how the government has programmed you to think. But in Venezuela, if they have oil, they say, hey, those resources are in Venezuela. They should benefit the people of Venezuela. See, our country doesn't do that. We take the money from the people and we say, no, we should give it to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and Pakistan, but no, not to the American people. No, they don't get it. Let's give it to everybody. But while we lambast these other countries that say we have resources right here in our own country, we want to benefit ourselves with what belongs to us, and we go down there and attack them and send the CIA to take over their leadership, or the leadership of our country is so despicable and evil, and they've been doing this for so long. If you don't believe that we should do what our founding fathers did to Great Britain, I don't think our founding fathers would have even spit on you if they knew you today. I mean, you'd be so lack of values, lack of determination, lack of character, less than you would almost not even be human in their eyes, because you don't stand for anything. The way that they trample on us and take our money for lies and for cons all around the world while they make us suffer like this is unfathomable. I've had things broken on my house now that have been broken for 15 years because I can't fix it. And probably don't know if I'll ever be able to. If my air conditioner goes out, that's another $8,000. The thing's 20 years old. I don't know how it's still alive. How am I supposed to replace that? You know? I opened my first savings account 2 weeks ago. It's got $300 in it. Because I realized my wife's going to have a surgery. And if I don't put some money in there, she's going to have a surgery and we're not going to be able to pay the bills for a few months while she's recovering. What's it coming out of? Well, we're no vacation next year, that's for sure. Or we'll do something extremely, extremely cheap, which is okay. We went 15 years in our family with no vacations, so we're pretty used to it, or 14 years. We had our first vacation in 2014. We got married in 2000. And we've had about 4 decent vacations since. 2 of them to Myrtle Beach. Once to Disney World and once to Universal. Now we're going back to Universal. My kids, if they're not extremely prudent, they won't even survive, much less get to go on vacations or cheap vacations. My dad always driven brand new cars his entire life. Every time he gets 5,000, 10,000 miles on it, he turns around, gets another car like it's, like grabbing another stick of chewing gum. I get a 150,000 mile car starting out with 150,000 miles on it and make it last for 10 years. That's my life. Okay. How are my kids ever going to buy a car, period? I don't care how old it is. Is it going to be like Cuba where they still have the same cars that were there before Fidel Castro took over because of the embargoes? And now the only cars there are, from the 1960s. Is it going to be like that? Old 50s and 60s cars that they've had to continually refix. Am I going to have to get a 50? I've already got a 24-year-old car for my kid. Is it going to be a 60-year-old car? Are they going to have to get their kids a 60-year-old car? Are they still going to be passing down the same cars to their kids like I'm doing? My first car was a 92. 20 years later, the newest car I can afford to get my kid is a 2000. Really think about that. What is she going to buy her kid? How old is that car going to be? This country is screwed bad. If you can afford to go to college, like I've said before, which is mostly in 75, 80% of the cases out here, just a money-making scam where they just take your money and leave you in even bigger debt so that when you get out, this is still all the money you can make, but now you have even more that you have to pay, which is happening more and more and more with all these stupid, gender studies programs and stuff. It'll never get you a job. Stuff I did, like, never get me a job, never contribute to a job or anything like that. I didn't do gender studies. I did theology, because, my parents thought it would be okay to just let me think that I could save the world rather than correct me, and say, no, but they believed, going to church. That was the thing to do. Right. Yeah. And the difference between me and them is I truly, truly believed it. I mean, they believe it, but I really believed it. And none of them ever told me, no, you're not supposed to really believe it. You're supposed to believe it like they believe it, only, a little bit to where it doesn't really get in the way of you making money and stuff. No, I believed it so much that it pretty much screwed any chance of me ever making money for the rest of my life. So that's part of the way that the whole thing's just bologna sandwiches. Look at the first letter of bologna and sandwich if you don't get that metaphor. Now, how on earth is the next generation? All these money scams and all with the colleges soaking up all this money. And even if they get a legitimate degree, good gosh, even if they somehow manage to get through it, most of them are still just barely going to survive. The very basic minimum, $40,000 for a family of 5. You ask, why is this generation refusing to get married? And not just in America, but in Japan, they're refusing to get married. Japan's population is predicted in the next 60 years to be less people than the country of Italy. Do you realize in my lifetime, Japan had 120 million people living in it? In the next 60 years, it's projected to be under 50 million people. The country of China has 1.2 billion people. It's predicted in the next 60 years to have 600 million, which is roughly twice the U.S. population now. I think we had 350 million or something like that, not counting all the Chinese that came here under Obama and Biden, as well as all the Mexicans. So, all the why is this generation also in America? Our population would not be going up if it wasn't for all these illegals coming in here, because we're having very, very few babies. Who in the world's going to do this? Who's going to look at this number and say, yeah, that sounds good. Just to feed and clothe them, I need $40,000 at health care. And this is why, for most of my life, I had to stay broke. Because you look at this and you go, there's a strategy. I can either work 3 or 4 jobs and get above this, or somehow luck into something amazing and make a whole lot more so that I can afford this and this crazy Obamacare program. Or I can make very, very low money, and I know lots of other people that do this. Good, decent people, but they just see the reality and get Medicaid, and then everything's paid for. And you get food stamps. Well, what's better? How do you jump that gap from, you have to stay in Ohio. The most you can make, last I heard, was $36,000 for a family of 5. And the most you can make is $36,000, and you can still get Medicaid, right? But in West Virginia, for example, it's like $20,000. It's way less. Every state's got different rules for how much you can make for Medicaid. So it's, a lot of people come to Ohio just to get Medicaid. How are you supposed to jump from 20,000 to 40,000? You can't. You can get a lot of overtime, and 40,000 just to barely make it, to actually thrive a little bit. How would you, get to 60 or 70 from $20,000? You have to bridge 20,000 from qualified for Medicaid to enough to actually live and make 60 or 70 or 80,000. And you got a whole country that's telling all these ladies that they're the boss woman and they can do this living alone and all this. Most men can't do this by themselves. A lot of women can't do this by themselves, but you got a country and a culture that's telling everybody to try to do this by themselves. So what happens? Well, they'd rather go down than up. And I spent most of my life doing the down, because going up was impossible. And even now, it's only because my wife and I both are working insane numbers of hours that we were able to finally, in the last couple of years, take the high route instead of the low route. And we're broke as can be. We'll never be able to afford a new car. We don't know what's going to happen if our air conditioner blows on our house. The foundation's cracked. There's no chance of ever fixing it. Both of us work insane numbers of hours. And look at my last video. I tried to make more money. 4 jobs in 3 months. Look at my last video and see how crazy this world is and how sane people just can't do it anymore, even when you try. And give it your best, because this environment, this mental environment of people in this generation, if you're just a decent, sane person, you're not compatible with how they think and operate. Decent people just don't make it today. Now, if you want to be angry and mean, and it needs to be more like in other countries, especially like Russia, where you could take a breath, just, it's not all about trying to keep up with your neighbors. Your government actually supports you. It actually wants you to have children. If you have more children, it helps you more, helps you with healthcare. Oh, we can't have socialized healthcare. I used to be so afraid of that word, socialized. I don't want, communism, But if you actually read Karl Marx, which I actually bought the Communist Manifesto today at the bookstore, and I was flipping through it, most of the ideas are pretty good from Karl Marx. But if you go forward in time and see what what Russia did with communism, what China did with communism, and you're like, yeah, that's not really what that said. And a lot of it is because they didn't decide to structure a government based on anything except communism. They didn't even divide the powers. They didn't have any sorts of checks and balances in their system. So obviously, if you have a tyrant is never going to, or even a tyrannical one-party system, they're never going to care about anything but themselves, even if on paper they're communist and for the people. You understand that? Now, I'm not for communism. Please don't get me wrong. But I am for saying that the resources we produce in this country should be for the people in which those resources lie. Just like every country on earth believes, all except America, all of our resources are supposed to go to everybody else in the world. But in every other country on earth, their resources belong to the people of their country. Isn't it our Constitution, our Declaration of says we the people, we're the government, right? So if we're the people and we're the government, how is it that all these people that supposedly are subjects under monarchical systems understand that their resources belong to them and not the monarch? And even their monarchs seem to understand it. That's messed up, and it's because we, the people here, have allowed those tyrants to rape and steal our wealth out from under us. And we're continuing to do it when we allow these dual citizens of Israel. 89% or something like that, or 85% of our congressmen and senators have dual citizenship with the country of Israel. Now you want to know why they sent them? They sent them $60 billion every year. And they just sent him another $20 billion here a couple weeks ago. And then Biden comes out and pretends, oh, I'm not going to send arms that are going to be used in Rafah. You just sent them $80 billion this year. You're going to pretend like you didn't fund their attack on Rafah, you dirty, stinking son of a gun. You're a scam artist. And I can't believe anybody's dumb enough to believe that lie. And so, we're raped, and of all of our wealth, of all of our health care, our American dream is just a lie and a con. Most of the world's making more money than we are now, even, and I'm not talking about the third world countries in Africa and stuff like that. And I even take a portion of my money and I help those that are poorer than me because I want them to succeed. And I send them money every month out of my pocket because I want people in other countries that have it even harder than I do to get a leg up and to realize somebody cares about them too. Okay. I want that. How come my government doesn't do that for me? Now, all the other governments of the world do that for their people, just about, like I said, there's some that are even worse and I want to help them. We're not the worst country on earth, but we're getting there fast. And maybe the next generation or two, that will be the case. Remains to be seen, but I don't see how we get around it at this point. Unless we fire every congressman, that we make it that the people just say, absolutely, I will not vote for anybody who has dual citizenship with Israel. No, you cannot send my money to Israel. No, you cannot send my money to Taiwan. Oh, but Taiwan might get attacked. Not our problem. Okay. Sorry about that, but it's not our problem. Vietnam was not our problem. Korea was not our problem. When's the last time we had a war in this country that we legitimately needed to fight? FDR protecting his property out in the Pacific, so and you can still see remnants of that business that he used to own. So he actually goes to war to defend his big properties around in coastal regions, his resort properties and all this stuff that he had all over the Pacific, sends our country to lose 400,000 of our own people to protect his properties. That's who Roosevelt really was. And if you don't believe it, look at the other Roosevelt who went to Cuba because, he was just such a bleeding heart, wonderful guy. He had to go down and free those poor Cubans and those poor Filipinos from those terrible Spanish rulers. Remember the Maine that we just happened to sink by ourselves, and all the Spanish people in Cuba were jumping into the water trying to rescue the people that on that sunken ship, the Maine. Just like 9/11. Oh, just like October 7, huh? Oh, we did it. We sunk the Maine. We sunk the Lusitania, okay? We sunk the Titanic with all the people who were against the creation of the Federal Reserve and the creation of the income tax all just happened to be on that ship. Oh, and JP Morgan just happened to get off. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and they sunk it on the exact same day as tax day and the day that they killed Lincoln. Yeah, okay. Just a coincidence, I'm sure, right? Cheney called off the Selfridge Air National Guard 30 minutes before those planes hit the World Trade Center from defending the airspace around the World Trade Center. That's your country. It is a con and a lie. When is the last time this country has been in a war that actually needed to be fought? That wasn't a con to steal our money and send it around the world or to protect somebody in government, not the people. Who won the war against Hitler? It wasn't the United States. Russia. Russia beat Hitler in Germany. We were just a part of it. It was Russia that surrounded Berlin. It was Russia that killed Hitler. It was not the United States. Stop believing the lies that your government has programmed with you and really think about what's going on. And instantly, our biggest ally that just won World War II for us, that just had been our ally since our revolution and helped fund our government during the revolution, that country is now our enemy? No, that was Hitler's enemy. So now you think that the Russians are enemies. They're not our enemies. They've never been our enemies. The Cold War was a big con, and people like Putin know it. That's why before he invaded the Ukraine, I have the speech translated in English. He said, I'm going after the people whose lives are contrary to nature, aka the rainbow, and Nazis. That's who Putin is fighting, because they beat Hitler in World War II, not us. So Russia has been our ally our entire life, and we've been taken over by Nazis. We're allegiant to the Saxe-Coburgs that sit on the London throne, the son of the SS Guard, Hitler's SS Guard. Son is sitting on the throne right now in England. That's why Harry, sometimes you see him with the swastika armband. He isn't just doing that for kicks and giggles, okay? He's doing it because he's telling you who his heritage really is. That's why George Bush made George Bush's grandfather was making parachutes and Hitler's uniforms out in Greenville, Tennessee, and why Hitler's car is still down there in Tennessee, and why Dr. Oz takes his pictures with Hitler's car, because Oz is the con that stole the wealth from America. He knows exactly who he is. The Oz and the Osbournes. Osborne, that family of child rapists that raped Hugh at 4 years old, that helped the FBI and governors steal the wealth for America with the Nazis from the London throne. And that's the real history of your country. And none of yous know it. Those are the people that designed 9/11 all the way back in 1953, when George Towers, get this, George Towers, break up the name, George Towers, like George Bush, right? Destroyed the Twin Towers, took Hugh Squire's baby pictures on 9/11, 1953, okay? When he was born. And it said Rogue, something like that, 1963 under the bottom, and I think it had one other number or something on the end. This was his baby pictures, okay? And so it's got Kennedy's assassination on it. Now, remember, Hugh was taken to Michigan. If you don't know our story, he was in school, and the FBI monitored him, and the famous families that created America were all in the same school together. As the family of the FBI ran that school on Hoover Street. Who was the director of the FBI? Hoover, the gay guy. as other gay guys like Osborne on Hoover Street attacked and killed Hugh Squire's twin. Really think about that. And raped him with Daryl Hall, Andrews, Anderson, and the rest of those child rapists that were all related to governors. 9/11 was planned all the way back in 1953, the same year that they killed Admiral Byrd and made up a bunch of nonsense conspiracy theories that, he found the center of the earth down in Antarctica through a portal in Antarctica. Yeah, sure he did. Why? Because they were stealing your wealth. They were stealing the trademarks. They were taking America's wealth. It started before then. It actually started at least back in 1912, at least. You could say, hey, these attacks have been going on since the Revolution because Great Britain never stopped fighting. They burned down our White House. If you remember, in the War of 1812, they've never stopped attacking this country, and they've sent their knights and their homosexuals to come over here and take over our music and our television. If you don't believe that, watch any news station. I don't care if it's Fox News on your pretend right, or if it's on your leftist CNN, and what is it? They're all British people from the throne giving you your news, and you sit there like a zombie when you listen to their British accents, and you don't even realize that this money is going straight to Great Britain, that this programming is coming from the Nazi throne of Great Britain and programming you with the lies and the nonsense that you believe, and everything you think about history to be true, that they tell you, everything that they reference is a lie, and you believe it. And you don't even understand it's Great Britain and Nazis doing that to you, because they took your wealth, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse until we will eventually have nothing. And that's their plan. You saw the rock and roll and the British invasion. You know, you saw the Beatles come here from Britain, and all you little girls were, he's saying Yellow Submarine, woohoo, and you know, I mean, deep lyrics like that. And, let's give them another $1 billion because they said, look at the Yellow Submarine. And Americans are just this level stupid, and they would go to these concerts and just and fawn over these British people stealing their money. It didn't get any better. Good gosh, they're almost all British today. You saw in the 70s, all these British bands, even the American bands, were under recording labels out of Great Britain, for heaven's sakes. Just look at them. I took a picture and put on Facebook one about Mitch Ryder from the 70s. And Mitch Ryder went to the same school that Hugh Squire went to. And, it was a British recording label. I mean, they've been attacking you for a long time. This is why they knight their homosexual knights, and they send them to America like Elton John, and they soak up billions and billions of dollars and send it. Now they got Spider-Man, and he's British. Try to find anybody on any movie anymore. Look at Netflix, and every freaking show is a bunch of Brits. It's hard to find an American. Do you really think that an American just won't work for $20 million a year or $15 million a movie? Is that why we have all these British actors? Is that the reason? Is that why we have British newscasters on every single news channel now? And each one of them, by the way, has a bottom line segment, the very trademark that was stolen from Hugh Squire and buried under the rubble of the World Trade Center. Look at them. They all have that bottom line segment now. CBS's bottom line segment, ABC, bottom line. And you hear them say the word bottom line almost every news story. And they do that on purpose because that was the theft. That was intentionally a big, huge part of taking their wealth away from Americans and part of Hugh Squire's family that they've been attacking since at least the Revolution. I mean, actors attacking Hugh's family. An actor attacked Lincoln at Ford's Theater. Think about that. The Ford family actually loved Americans. The Ford family came in and Ford would pay you not only a majorly bigger wage than anybody else around, but he started a college and would pay people to go to his college so that they could be smart enough to run the stuff. And he would go and sit down with people and pay them to invest in their lives. I mean, this was a decent person. Ford's Theater, okay, before Henry Ford. I don't know if he was their great ancestor that started the theater or what, great grandfather, but they're not far separated. Okay, it was at Ford's Theater when an actor attacked Lincoln. Think about that. The day April 15, when Lincoln died, that's when they sunk the Titanic. That's when they made tax day to throw it in your face, the theft that they did to this country through acting. That was Great Britain. Somehow or another, Great Britain had something to do with the attack on um, Lincoln. Not exactly sure how, but they'll be in it somewhere. I haven't figured it out exactly just yet. But Great Britain and act, and even if it's just indirectly, because who was he? He was with the Flynns. His friends was Flynn, and who do you see? The Errol Flynns in Detroit, who are the a massive gay part of Detroit. Gays calling themselves the Errol Flynns all over. Errol Flynn, the gay actor. Okay, there was a homosexual component that was attacking Lincoln. Gee, you think it's just a coincidence that Davis, the president of the Confederacy, was arrested wearing a dress? Do you really think so? No. I'll tell you exactly what I think happened there. I think Union soldiers put a dress on him, reported it like that because Jefferson Davis was a champion of the homosexual movement from the South. Whether he meant to be or not, I don't know, but people knew it, and they knew. Think about this. The slaves of the South and the masters, the slave masters, many of whom, like 80% of, were Jewish, by the way. 80% of the slave masters were Jewish people that owned slaves, and slaves weren't just slaves to pick your cotton and stuff like that. They had to do everything the master said, if you catch my drift. Okay? That was a big part. Those special services that those slaves had to do, that was a big part of what was going on down south and in the Confederacy. And so when Jefferson Davis was arrested in a dress, supposedly by Union troops, what do you think they were saying? What's the real story there? They were calling the South what they were: homosexuals, effeminate. See, you got this all wrong. History is kind of, you got the South now, and you think, oh, those are the tough guys down south. Those are the country farmer. If they were so tough, why did they have slaves do all their work for them? The real people doing the work were in the factories up north. The people that were lazy and fat and, just big bullies, pretty much like people that are in the rainbow now, like Missy, the interview I went to recently at a box truck factory, where I come in and there's this 400-pound dude sitting there, and that's going to give me an interview. And not very far into it, he says, "Hi, my name's Missy." Deep voice. Wasn't a few seconds later, he tells me that he's a woman. Obvious man, big broad shoulders, at least 400 pounds. Deep, obvious, big muscles and a voice, broad shoulders. I mean, very obviously, a man didn't even resemble in any way, shape, or form any feminine feature whatsoever. Made a point of telling me he's a woman. And of course, I didn't want the job at that point. I just wanted to get the heck out of there. This is your South. I mean, and that was in West Virginia, by the way, which was part of the South. I mean, I realized they broke away and all that, but think about that. If they're so tough, they gotta have this control. And that's what bullies do. They want to be in control of other people and force other people to accept their lifestyle. What do you think slavery was? Forcing other people to accept your highfalutin lifestyle, making you do all the work. And now they run your country. Osborne raped you. Let's go to Osborne for a second. Two Osborne brothers with Daryl Hall and Andrews and Anderson, relatives of Southern governors like Long and Wallace, all raped Hugh and killed his twin and raped other kids in a basement in Michigan, Governor Osborne's basement. Oh, there was another Governor Osborne in Kansas right before The Wizard of Oz was written. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. And Oz, The Wizard of Osborne. You put that together and you say, let's go over the rainbow where bluebirds fly, and every color of the rainbow is another fetish. And the rainbow or handkerchief code, as they sometimes call it, where if you stick a certain collar in your pocket and you let the handkerchief kind of hang out, that tells what rainbow fetish that you're into. And so others that are into that fetish can identify you. So the color blue is what two homosexual men are usually doing. I'll try to keep this G rated as possible, okay, in case your kids are listening or something. But so you got what homosexual men do is represented by the color blue. And so you got over the rainbow where bluebirds fly, you see, on The Wizard of Oz. You got Kermit the Frog singing out there, let's make the rainbow connection. Because homosexuals used to identify one another by asking the question, are you a friend of Dorothy? Straight from The Wizard of Oz, because they understood the rainbow code in that movie very well. So if somebody said, yes, I'm a friend of Dorothy, then they would know that they've just met another homosexual and could shack up. And that was the code before it was permissible for them to come out of the closet openly. And so you know that it's tied to the movie The Wizard of Oz, which originally, when it was first written, was actually a good book. It was telling you about how we were supposed to keep the gold standard. And now they turned it around and they turned it into a homosexual attack on America, which is still going on today, which is why you have Dr. Oz taking his pictures down there with Hitler's car. And Dr. Oz, right after Joan Rivers says, Michelle Obama is transgendered, you have Joan Rivers being murdered a week later in the hospital, and Dr. Oz had been her doctor. Huh. Oh, and who runs Trump's presidential campaign? Osborne. Huh. Who runs the sex crimes division of the FBI right now? Osborne. Just a coincidence, right? I mean, because of Herbert Hoover, the gay guy who loved Anderson Tolson, Clyde Anderson Tolson, that was, and Anderson was one of the guys that raped Hugh with Osborne. And they all did it raped them on Hoover Street, raped Hugh on Hoover Street and killed those boys on Hoover Street and raped those other boys on Hoover Street. As all the families of the founders were all right there in the same school growing up together because the FBI was watching them, putting them all together so they could control your country. This is the real history of your country. I don't know anybody else except Hugh himself that's saying it. So it's high time America wake up and start learning some things. Osborne, learn about Osborne. Good gosh. Gee, you think it's just a coincidence that Harry Osborne is Spider-Man's enemy, that you have Ozzy Osbourne knighted from the British throne, taking billions and billions of dollars? I mean, they had to say it twice, Ozzy Osbourne, just in case you didn't realize that Oz and Osborne were connected through the rainbow. And we've said this story 1,000 times, but it bears repeating. Osborne is also, Marie Osborne works for Channel 4 and Graham Media that runs the radio in Detroit, where the Errol Flynns were, in Detroit. And, they're in that Channel 4 and Graham Media WJRD radio station. And right there, so Marie Osborne has a channel, and Emily Barr is the CEO of Graham Media there, WJRD. And who's the Barr family? B-A-R-R. Roseanne Barr is just from right down the road there in Detroit. Hugh used to go over to Roseanne's house as a kid. Roseanne Barr, the actress. Yeah. Found out that Roseanne's father was actually fed to alligators by her mother in her mother's basement. So she apparently killed her dad her husband. Roseanne's mother killed her husband and fed him to alligators that they kept in the basement. So anyway, so Barr's running Graham Media, the same family as Roseanne Barr. That's why you have them making up all this nonsense BS conspiracy theories about MK Ultra with Kathy O'Brien, also from Detroit, who lived right down the road with them. Why O'Brien was the first person supposedly detained by the FBI for the arrest of and murder of Jimmy Hoffa, but it was really Hugh Squire was the first person who was detained by the FBI for the murder of Jimmy Hoffa. He didn't, but he was set up to take a car. But yeah, he didn't kill a guy with his kids in his car that day. But anyway, so Osborne. Okay, so we're back to Barr. We're talking about Barr. So you have Roseanne Barr and Emily Barr, and who does Attorney General? Who's Trump's Attorney General? And as his campaign is being run by Osborne, he chooses Barr for his Attorney General, doesn't he? Oh, and then you just find out that Attorney General Barr's father hired Jeffrey Epstein as a school teacher back in the 70s. A school teacher. He put Attorney General Barr's father. This was mainstream news. I still have clippings of the story. It's not like I couldn't just pull it out and show it to you if I wanted to sit there and figure it out on the computer. It's right here. These are mainstream news articles. Okay, Attorney General Barr's dad hired Jeffrey Epstein as a school teacher to put him in front of kids. Do you think that maybe that Trump hired Barr, who also their family in Detroit is running his buddy Graham's radio station, WJRD and Graham Radio in Detroit, Graham Media in Detroit? Do you think maybe that there's a connection there because maybe Trump had some business ties with Epstein? Gee, I think so. You think maybe Melania might have come from Epstein? I do. I wonder if she was doing any service on that island for anybody before she ended up with Trump. Wouldn't be surprised to find that out at all. In my basement, I have no idea why, but there's like an infestation of flies down here for some reason. So if you see flies buzzing around, they're freaking driving me insane. At least it's not my mother's basement, okay? It's my basement. Well, we'll be in another 12 years or so. All right, 15 years. So this is the history of your country. Good gosh. Even the president of your country, and this is a con that has been going on for 150 years. Americans know almost nothing about it. They've stripped our wealth away, and our kids have almost no chance now. How are they supposed to come up with $40,000 starting out from day one just to survive so that they don't have to live in their parents' basement? I don't know. I don't know how they do it. How do you work 4 jobs and also you need at least two full-time jobs to make enough money to barely squeak by, supposing that your entire college is paid for through scholarships? How does anybody do that? And you're going to tell me that there's still an American dream. This is why every kid says, I don't want to get married now. What's the point? I don't want to have kids because that's just 3 bills. It's just Obamacare and your mortgage and food were the 3 things I listed at the beginning of this. You need that much just for those 3 things, let alone having cars, even old used cars, putting gas in those cars, insurance on those cars, raising another $10,000 for that, for all that other stuff that you need. You're screwed. And if you don't wake up, your children will be third worlders soon. Old Thomas Jefferson tried to tell us. He said that, if you don't get rid of these banks taking over and that want to come over and start the reserve banks, he was fighting it in the 1800s because the British banking system is a couple hundred years older than our revolution, by the way. So this was not a new concept, these Federal Reserve banks. Only Hugh's ancestor, Andrew Jackson. By the way, do you ever notice how much that Hugh and Andrew Jackson kind of look alike? There's a reason for that. It's because they're related. So Andrew Jackson was the only one that ever threw out all the reserve banks and paid off all the debt for the United States. And he took the heat for it, but he didn't care. Somebody tried to kill him. The gun didn't go off. And old Andrew Jackson took his cane and beat him right there in the White House. Or is either the White House or the front of Congress. I forget. Okay, there. I mean, he almost got assassinated by the bankers for it. This is why the Titanic went down. This is why, after Lincoln had created greenbacks that used any reserve bank system, that he was attacked. And JFK was attacked after creating silver currency. So they based all of their attacks on Oz and the Wizard of Oz, which originally was a book saying we need to keep gold as our reserve currency. That's what the Yellow Brick Road was gold originally in the story, and turned it all into a homosexual attack and Over the Rainbow where bluebirds fly, and Osborne attacking our country for generations now. Oh, gee, it's just a coincidence. The Brothers Osborne is the first gay open homosexual in country music now, isn't it? You don't see this? I mean, this is clear cut to me, and only because I've studied Hugh Squire's life. If you haven't, you should go back and look at these videos and really study it. I feel like there's a good reason to. We're bankrupt. In 1933, our country was intentionally put into perpetual bankruptcy. By definition, I mean, that was the act that created the Federal Reserves and got rid of the gold standard and so forth, was that your country be put into a state of perpetual bankruptcy. Now, instead of having gold as your standard, which was eventually not completely done away with at the time, only partially, then a little more through World War II was part of that. And then a little more through the Great Society, which created the need to expand our money supply so that Nixon had to completely remove us off of the gold standard. And so now every single dollar you make, here's how this works, okay? Let's see if I can get it right, okay? Let's see if I can draw this a little bit, because a lot of people don't actually know how our banking works, all right? So let's say you want to get some money, okay? $100. I promise to pay $110 back. So we'll add 10% interest to keep round figures. $110 to the bank. Here's the bank. Okay. Put a big dollar sign on top. What I put it S. All right. I promise to pay $110 to the bank. You go to the loan. If I can borrow $100, right? 110 this way. If the bank gives me $100 loan, right? Let's keep it right, nice and simple. At that exact moment, the bank don't have $110. I don't know how many people know this, don't know this, because we are now, because of Woodrow Wilson and all these attacks I've told you about, under the British devised Federal Reserve Bank, where all the Federal Reserve banks are owned by Great Britain. The system that created banking in the first place was the Queen in Britain, okay, or the King in the 1600s, okay. So we're partial reserve is what this is called, the partial reserve system, all right. And the second that you borrow $100, you're promised to pay them right there $110. The bank then goes to the Federal Reserve. So the big bank, right, that's owned by Great Britain, a bunch of British banks and the throne of England and probably the popes and stuff too. So they go to that and they print $100 right then, out of nowhere. The Federal Reserve Bank doesn't have to have a dime They don't have to keep anything. They don't have to reserve anything. The word is a straight up lie, and it's not owned by your federal government. So even the federal part is a lie intended to deceive the American public. Even though our Constitution says that the Congress must coin money, Woodrow Wilson and the Congress decided, screw the Constitution, we'll just pretend like that doesn't exist, and we'll let the Federal Reserve banks print the money, and we'll just completely ignore that part of the Constitution. They print $100 out of thin air. But here's the problem, okay? This is called a debt note. Notice you don't have money, you have a debt note in your pocket, okay? A debt note. So your money is a picture of created debt. And do you know, if you were to pay the bank directly and they paid their loan back to the Federal Reserve Bank, that $100, just like it was created out of nothing, disappears out of nothing. So if somehow you could take all the money and pay it back to the Federal Reserve, there is no money. It ceases to exist. It's wiped out. It's canceled off the books right at that second, okay? This is how your country works. Very few people understand the banking system in this country. But the problem is, you created 100, but you have 110. Well, where did the 10 come from? He didn't have it. He didn't have it. And he only created 100. But he's got to pay back 110 out of something that doesn't exist. So what do you have to do? You have to create more debt. And what happens is, in order to pay that back, you have to go out and get more loans and more loans and more loans and more loans, and you get an ever bigger bubble of expanding money. And it has to increase forever. This is why you had COVID in 2020, folks. They had to expand the money supply, and they needed a reason to do it. Okay. Oh, that's why it was made at Harvard by Lieber and Obama's buddies over there, and then taken to China and released. Perhaps accidentally at the beginning, I don't know. An awful lot of movies seem to indicate it was going to happen, just like 9/11. It was in 1,000 different movies before it happened, you know. So, you know, probably they knew COVID was going to happen, but they had to expand the money supply. Oh, but not Trump. Not Trump. He's this little saint that just loves everybody and loves the American people and the flag. And oh, he's so gooey and we love him. Except he created $7 trillion in debt, people. $7 trillion. More than Obama, for heaven's sakes, I think. If I remember right, I think Obama created 5 or 6 trillion or something like that. And now it's $33 trillion. I mean, I remember thinking when the Federal Reserve reached like 3 or 4 trillion, this is unpayable. This is insane. And now it's $33 trillion. Why? Because you have to have debt to create more money to pay back the previous debt. And that's why they do it over time, to try to push it as long as possible. How many debt notes do you need to pay back $33 trillion, people? It's a heck of a lot of banknotes. You think it's bad now? Wait another. You think $6 bread is bad now? Wait till it's $150, because that's what our children are facing. You've been attacked by Nazis and the British throne, and they're hundreds of years ahead of us. We started a country and we said, screw the monarchy. Well, the monarchy said, well, we'll show you what that means over the next couple hundred years. Do you realize there's only about 5 countries on Earth that Great Britain has not, N-O-T, invaded? Britain has invaded almost every country on Earth. Just a handful that they've not invaded. Maybe it's 10 or something like that. But there's like 200 countries or something, and 5 or 10 of them Great Britain has not invaded. This is not one of them. So they burned down our White House in 1812, if you remember. We were them at one point. So they have hundreds of years of experience. doing this stuff. Good gosh, the banking system was started in the 1600s. They were learning this stuff in the Crusades when the Templars were creating the first proto banks, okay, if you will. Not saying Templars were all bad or anything, but yeah, they were. They were SOBs because what they do, they just went down to Jerusalem as a money con. Because what they want to do, steal people's money. Oh, we'll protect your money for you. It's not our fault if you didn't make it back. Gee, they became very, very wealthy. Then they created the first reserve banks in the 1600s in Great Britain. It's time to learn some history. It's time to learn how the world really works and how everybody is corrupt, including Trump and especially Trump. Don't think that Trump is your hero. He's the furthest thing on earth from that. He's the biggest deception con man you have ever seen in your life. Working with Osborne and Epstein and Barr and Graham, the most evil SOBs in our country today. Well, if that didn't teach you something, I don't know what will, folks. So I still enjoy my life. So even though I'm frustrated, I'm knowledgeable about what's going on, but I don't have an American dream because my eyes are wide open. I see what's going on. I don't know how to fix it except to if enough of yous come together somehow, or the system collapses and then we all go and make something different next time. But I don't know how, because the people that are trying to fix it will still be under the same delusion if they never learn anything. So how are they going to fix it? How are they ever going to kick Britain out of the country? They don't even understand that they've been screwed by Great Britain for the last 250 years. That all your wealth is going over there into their banks, into their throne. And if you don't believe it, just watch the news, watch your movies. Try to find one that doesn't have all British actors anymore. Because, those Americans, they just won't work for $15 million a movie. Okay, there's a few that won't. There's a few Americans still. Where's Robert Downey Jr. from? Let me see if I can find that real quick because I'm kind of curious. I'm going to look on my phone here. Let's see if he's American. Well, let's see if he's actually Canadian. I'm very curious. That guy's made $500 million so far. Just in Marvel movies alone, he's made $500 million. Let's see, where is Robert Downey Jr. from? He might be an exception, but I honestly don't know. Let's find out. Where is he? Oh, he's an American actor. What do you know? Okay, see, there are a few exceptions still, but not very many. well, good for him. So we have one American out there, the Iron Man. But good gosh, look at all the rest of them. I mean, Thor's not American. Is Ant-Man American? I don't think so. I think Aquaman, I think he's gay. Momoa, part of the homosexual attack. Oh, I know. He probably don't tell you what he is, but I'm pretty sure. Or at least bi. I mean, just look at the T-Mobile commercial, man. If you don't think he's gay after that, there's not much hope for you. All right. Well, I'm going to let it go here. Bye.